everyone, this is RadTechShoe and I have another Battleborn character review episode for you, and in this video we're going to be looking at the Eldrid Dwarf Boldur. We're going to be going over his skill setup, his lore and backstory, his helix loadout, and tips and tricks that I have tried to find to play this guy as effectively as possible on the battlefield. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Boldur's first skill is called Boldur Dash. He will dash forward, dealing small damage to the opponent. It will knock them back and activate his rage. His passive ability is rage, and we'll get to that in a second. But when he knocks enemies back, if they hit a wall or like another enemy, they will be stunned for a few seconds. And while Rune of Power is active, Boldur's Boldur Dash will deal 25% extra damage as well as 144 damage over 4 seconds. We'll get to Rune Power in a second. His second skill is called Axe Toss. When Boldur throws his axe, he will deal 200 damage. You know, let's do a good, fair, rough amount of damage. Now, retrieving the axe will reduce its cooldown by roughly 20%. With the Rune Power, his axe will explode on impact, dealing 300 damage. Now, what are the Rune of Power? Well, that's his ultimate. His ultimate is called Runes of Power. Boldur will activate Runes of Power, his shield and his axe will glow, and he will have increased melee damage by 18% and converts 25% of damage blocked into health. When he uses his Axe Toss or his Boldur Dash, it will consume the corresponding runes. So he activates runes, his shield and his axe glow. There's one rune on each. If he uses Axe Toss, the rune on the axe goes away. If he uses Boldur Dash, the rune on the shield goes away. And remember, when Boldur has the Runes of Power active on his axe and his shield, his other skills get additional properties. Boldur Dash will deal extra damage and 4 additional seconds over time, and Axe Toss will explode on impact, dealing splash damage to all enemies in the immediate area right next to the axe. So Runes of Power not only increases his melee damage and converts block damage into health, but it also gives his skills additional properties. Now, his passive ability is called Rage. Boldur will go into a rage, and when he is enraged, when Boldur kills an enemy, he will melee 20% faster and take 25% less damage for 6 seconds. And that's just killing any enemy, even little minions. So, in order to activate Rage as much as possible, try and kill little minions as often as you can. His basic standard weapon, his R2, is the Runic Axe. Boldur deals slow, powerful melees with his axe. When unarmed, Boldur falls back on hand-to-hand combat with 30% enhanced movement speed. So his R2 is just the basic axe swing, and when he doesn't have the axe, he'll just do straight-up melee punches. One of his other abilities is the Akuni Great Shield. When you hold L2, he will use his shield to block incoming damage, and he can block up to 2,000 incoming damage. So it's an excellent ability. Boldur is an excellent tanky character. He has a good level of survivability, and that's going to do it for his skill setup. Now we're going to move on to his lore and backstory. So the first thing you should know about Boldur is he is one of the Woodsworn. It is a small group, a small combat unit for the planet Ekinar, meant to repel small invading forces. It's not meant for large-scale intergalactic warfare or anything like that. They're only a small team of ragtag Eldrid warriors meant to protect the planet from small invading forces such as Varelsi scouts and so on and so forth. The relationship between Boldur and Thorn, I mentioned it in the Thorn video, but I'll go over it again, is that Thorn was, her and her parents were refugees from another planet, and they took up refuge on Ekinar, and Thorn met Boldur there. And due to circumstances of Thorn being pricked by a Mimicaris vine, it poisoned her, Boldur found her, took care of her, and the two have had a very strong relationship since. The two of them had been inseparable, their family. Thorn looks up to him as kind of a grandfather mentor, and Boldur looks after Thorn and realizes that she's kind of young and stubborn and impulsive, but he knows that deep down she's a good person. So the two of them have a very good relationship with one another. Now, one other thing that is mentioned is Boldur's axe and shield. As mentioned, they have runic powers. Boldur is actually an excellent skilled craftsman in these ancient Aztanti relics. These relics appear to have Aztanti nature attached to them that allows them to hold such power well beyond the realm of a regular melee weapon. And that's what Boldur is able to tap into. However, the axe has the sigil of a bear on it, Apparently, there's a story. Boldur had some backstory of like him riding a bear into combat. You know, this great cedar bear, and the two of them were inseparable, best combat buds. But apparently, the bear is no longer with Boldur. They've been separated, and whenever Boldur is reminded of this story, he breaks out into tears and sobs, and obviously he misses his fighting buddy, his great cedar bear. But Boldur apparently has a very strong connection with this animal. They were obviously best of buds, fighting in combat, protecting one another, but the bear is no longer with Boldur. So now he's really upset over that. Well, he's been upset for a long time, and he breaks out into a sob whenever it's brought up. However, the shield was crafted from a codpiece of an Akuni Golem Guardian. So one of the golems from Akunar that you may have found in the Sentinel mission, those golems, those giant guardians, Boldur's shield is from something along those lines, something of that nature, one of those types of enemies. And how Boldur managed to acquire it himself so long ago on his own must have been quite the challenge. So Boldur definitely is a proven combat veteran. He knows how to fight. He knows how to rough and tumble with the best of them. He's an excellent skilled fighter, and him and Thorn have been an excellent asset, not only for combat, but also for inspirational purposes to all the Battleborn. And that's really all there is about Boldur's lore and backstory. And now we're going to go into the helix loadout that I like to use with my Boldur playthrough, with my Boldur gameplay. Alright, so right off the bat, level 1, I like to go with Crash Helmet. Activating Boldur Dash generates an overshield on Boldur for a brief period, giving him an extra 225 overshield for 8 seconds. This increases Boldur's tankiness and survivability even more so than it already is. It's pretty high already, but Crash Helmet just increases that, and it plays to one of Boldur's strengths. Next up, level 2. I never really gravitated towards anything, really. Giant Kill, Long Distance Dash, Pinballer, or Gather No Moss. I never really liked any of these, to be perfectly honest. None of them were really strong or, that I preferred. Other than Long Distance Dash. Long Distance Dash is the only one I kind of gravitated towards just because I like being able to dash further distances in case I need to beat a hasty retreat. So I went with Long Distance Dash just because it's somewhat familiar to me and it's simple for me to understand. It's not something that's complex or requires additional, factors or variables. It's just literally a straight dash distance increase. There's nothing. I'm not dependent on doing anything else unique or special in order to get a bonus here. So, the next up, level 3, I like to go with Stunning Blows. When Boldur is unarmed, his primary melee attacks slow enemies. So when Boldur's not carrying his axe and he's punching you instead of smashing you with the axe, his melee attacks will then do regular, will slow people down. It'll slow you down for 3 seconds. That's excellent. That's a great way to make it so that enemies have a hard time escaping Boldur once he starts wailing on them and have a hard time fighting back. So I definitely like Stunning Blows for level 3. Now level 4, I like to go with Head Splitter. Enemies hit with Axe Toss are slowed. What this means is they are slowed down, which means I hit them with Axe Toss, they are slowed. And then I start wailing on them, and when I'm punching them, when I don't have my axe, they're all slowed again and again and again. And it makes it very difficult for them to fight back when they're continuously being slowed. And it makes it much easier for Boldur to hit them when they're being slowed. So I like to go with Head Splitter for 4. Next up, level 5, I like to go with Angry Agility. When Rage is active, Boldur's movement speed increases. I like using this. It makes me harder to hit, and it makes it so that I can chase down enemies and catch up to them faster. Desperate Rage is not a terrible thing. It's pretty good. It's a good defensive maneuver, and Berserker Rage is also pretty useful as well. But I like Angry Agility just because of the mobility benefit, because it makes Boldur much harder to hit, and the movement speed increase is just tremendous. If it were like 10 movement speed, it wouldn't be all that great, but 30% is a significant difference maker when playing as Boldur. Next up, level 6. I like to go with Salt the Wound. Enemies hit by Axe Toss suffer increased damage for a short time. So they're going to take more damage for 4 seconds, roughly. Well, don't forget, we just modified our Axe Toss to slow enemies down. So they're slowed, and they're going to take increased damage for 4 seconds, and that's just increased damage in general. That also can include from other teammates. So Salt the Wound is good. If you want to hit someone and peg them and it slows them down and the rest of you and your teammates just gang up on that one person, They're slowed for 3 seconds thanks to the axe toss modifier, and now they're going to take increased damage. So Salt the Wound can really add up to pretty much say, hey, I hit this guy, target him, and then you and your teammates can just try and, for the next 4 to 5 seconds, focus on that enemy and try and take him out of the game. Next up, level 7. I like to go with Wild Blood. Increase the damage of all of Boldur's melee attacks by 18%. Dwarven Constitution is a good ability. It's good in that it increases Boldur's tankiness and his survivability. However, we don't need to focus on that. We can use items to pretty much replace Dwarven Constitution. Whereas Wild Blood, an 18% damage increase is significant enough for me to warrant that over Dwarven Constitution. Next up, level 8. I like to go with either Impatience or I guess of Anger. Increasing the effect of Rune Power on Boulder Dash is not too bad of an idea. I did play with that a little bit, but I do like Impatience just because it allows me to use Boulder Dash more often, meaning I get to be sent into Rage more often, and I get the Overshield more often. And not only that, but remember, we've also modified Rage so that when Rage is active, Boulder gets a 30% movement speed. So we now get to increase, so now that also happens more often. Knockout Punch, as Boulder health drops, his unarmed melee attacks deal increased damage up to 18%. Not a terrible idea if you're always getting, close, just barely losing battles, or you find yourself barely winning. Knockout Punch can be a good alternative, but I like Impatience just because it makes it so that I'm not really in danger of dying as often as I would be otherwise. I'm not that great with Boulder, so I prefer Impatience personally over Knockout Punch. Next up, level 9. I like to go with either one of these, Death and Axes or Trusty Toss. Death and Axes, killing an enemy with Axe Toss increases Boulder's max health. Major enemies apply this effect twice. This effect can stack 5 times. All stacks are lost on death. This is good against minions because it just says kill an enemy. It doesn't have to be a major enemy. It doesn't have to be an enemy Battleborn. It just says kill an enemy. So if you kill a little minion, you can get the Death and Axes benefit. Trusty Toss is not too terrible in that retrieving Boulder's runic axe reduces the axe toss's cooldown. That means you hit someone with axe toss, then you go pick it up, and the cooldown is reduced by 20% immediately upon picking up that axe. So not too bad. It allows you to use axe toss more efficiently so long as you're able to pick it up, especially right after hitting your opponent. So you can go with either Trusty Toss or Death and Axes, depending upon which type of benefit you would like to gain. And lastly, I never really got to level 10 all that much with Boulder, so I didn't have a whole lot of experience with this. But Axe Mastery isn't too bad. While a Rune of Power is active on Boulder's axe, it will deal increased melee damage based upon his current health. So 2% bonus damage for every 250 health. That's not too bad considering how he also has an increase in 18% melee damage. However, Axe Mastery is slightly counterintuitive to Knockout Punch. It's Knockout Punch. As Boulder's health gets lower, his damage increases. So Axe Mastery is kind of the opposite of that, and it only works when you have the Rune of Power active on Boulder's axe. It doesn't work whenever he's running around. Runic Replenishment, activating Runes of Power while a rune is still active, instantly replenishes Boulder's health. Either rune will restore 50% health, while both will restore 100% health. This means so that, hey, if you're running around with the runes and you're just swinging and you're not using any skills, and then you activate Runic Replenishment again, when you activate your Runes of Power while both are still on, you'll just gain like an insane amount of health. So that's very good if you can pull it off. I myself didn't pull it off all that much. And Shield Mastery isn't too bad either. While a Rune of Power is active on Boulder's Great Shield, he converts more damage blocked into health. Either one of these I never really got to use all that much, but Runic Replenishment in theory for me seems very useful, like I said, if you can pull it off. If you can pull it off, you can catch your opponents way off guard, and when the fight's getting low, both you and your opponent are wailing on each other, then all of a sudden you just activate your Runes of Power, and then your health just radically goes you either get half or all your health back. It's an insane amount. It can be an insane difference maker. And that's really going to be it for Boulder's Helix menu, and now we're going to head back to the gameplay. Now when it comes to items that I like to use with Boulder, I like to use things to make him a little tankier and increase his survivability. He has built-in health regen, just like all Eldrid fighters. Every single person of the Eldrid faction has built-in natural health regen. So I like to give him increased health regen, give him things that, because he has a built-in 7.0 seconds of, 7.0 points of health regen per second. I like to increase that, so give him even more health regen. Movement speed is actually also very beneficial to Boldur. And you can also then, for the third item, you can go with, you know, a vest or body armor to increase health, to decrease the damage taken. Or you can go with something for attack speed if you want. It's up to you for the third item, but I definitely like to go with health regen for Boldur, just to increase his ability to live longer in battles. That way you can hide behind your shield and you'll start regenerating health, and you just kind of turtle your way through battles and just make it very difficult for your opponents to kill you. Now, speaking of difficult to kill, Boldur is very tough to kill in and of, you know, just naturally. He does have a good level of tankiness. However, if you give him a pocket healer like a Miko or an Alani, Boldur is damn difficult to fight against. He is very frustrating to battle against by himself, you know, on his own. But if you just give him a pocket healer like a Miko that follows him around and constantly gives him the healing beam and uses biosynthesis to heal himself and Miko, then you know what? It's just it's such a difference maker to have a pocket healer. And that's one of the best ways that I like to use Boldur. Is I like to stick close to my healers and focus on trying to stay alive and trying to tank things. I like to get in the way of my opponents, use my shield to block, and give my opponents a little bit of a headache. Boldur is pretty good in terms of his ability to survive. I have trouble dealing damage with him. His attacks are very slow, and I find myself missing a little more often than I would like. So it's a little frustrating to try and you know, melee other melee characters like a Wrath and stuff like that. But I definitely find the appeal of Boldur, and I think he's a fun melee character. He's just not the greatest because he does have a shield like Galilea, and unfortunately, I'm going to compare him to Galilea, in that I don't think he's as good a melee character as like Galilea or even Wrath. I just think he's a fun melee character. He's a different change of pace. He requires a lot of patience and a lot of skill. He's not someone you can just pick up with and just immediately go to town with and just destroy people. You're going to have to play smart with Boldur. You're going to have to learn the ins and outs and learn how to pick your spots. He's not that great at, you know, just jumping in there and getting kills. You're going to have to be smart with Boldur. One thing I do like to use is I mentioned this in the Kelvin review, but I like to combo Boldur's Boldur Dash with other skills. So if my opponents, let's say my teammates stun an opponent or slow them down, then I'll use Boldur Dash to try and line up a good angle so that I knock them into a wall, and then me and my teammate can pin them there. Boldur Dash is an excellent ability in that if you want to try and single out one person, you can hit them with Axe Toss to slow them down, then use Boldur Dash, knock them away from their teammates, and then you and your teammates can just gang up on them. So Boldur Dash requires a little bit of a setup. I do miss it from time to time. It can be difficult for me to land those hits. However, when I do land those hits and we stun enemies, our opponents are in deep trouble, especially if you're communicating with your team and you're like, hey guys, this guy is separated, he's wounded, he's slowed, let's get him, let's gang up on him. Boldur is pretty good at that. So one thing I like to do is I like to combo with like Kelvin's sublimate ability. He'll stun an enemy, then I'll go in and I'll hit them with Axe Toss and then Boldur Dash, knock them into a wall, and then Kelvin and me can just team up and just start, you know, meleeing the shit out of whoever the unfortunate bastard is. So Boldur does require a little bit more patience to learn than you would expect from most melee characters. He's not beginner friendly in my opinion, but he is fun. I don't consider him the best melee character. I still consider Galilea a slightly better version because of her skills and her abilities and the fact that she's much more lethal. But Boldur, make no mistake, he can be very frustrating to deal with, and if you can land your Boldur Dashes and you can constantly be sent into rage, get that overshield, and just, you know, you're just going to harass the shit out of your opponents, and you're going to tank a lot of shit that your opponents are going to have to, they're going to have to gang up on you if they want to kill you quickly. And that's one of the worst problems with Boldur, is that on one-on-one he's fine, but in being outnumbered, Boldur dies relatively quickly. So try your best to stay near a healer. and that way you can tank all the attacks your opponent throws at you. Throw up your shield when necessary. Use your items for health regen, as well as survivability, movement speed, and maybe attack speed if you want. And you should have a lot of fun with Boldur. He's a lot of fun to play with. And that's going to do it for this video. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe, comment down below, and I'll see you guys all later. This is RadTech Shoes signing off.